So one of the big twists in this book is that Ruin is able to edit or alter written words. One of my favorite ways that gets referenced in the fandom is that it's like a great way to save face. After all, when I wrote my theory down in my notes, I totally wrote it correctly. But then Ruin came and changed it. Made me sound stupid on my podcast, or when posting a fan theory on Reddit, or maybe when Brando Sando had to do a re-edit on the ebook or whatever. That's just Ruin coming in and altering the words.
So Ruin is a scapegoat.
Yeah. So less of a meme with a punchline this week, but it's still one that makes me happy, and you see it in the fandom. It makes me happy every time I see it, on Reddit in particular. So welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual reader's guide to the Cosmere. I'm your co-host and meme enthusiast. I've used that one before. Ruin enthusiast?
And
Nick
your name
Gorman.
is?
Nick Gorman.
There we go. And I'm your co-host, AJ Gorman. Hey, cousins.
So this is our Well of Ascension episode about the Cosmere Connections in it. So this is a spoiler-full episode for not just Well of Ascension and the first two Mistborn books, but actually all Mistborn books up through the Lost Metal, as well as Stormlight Archive through
Secret History.
Yeah, Secret History. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that comes up in our notes, but
A lot of words of Brandon.
Yeah. So spoilers abound.
But hopefully, if things haven't made sense up to you up through now, hopefully maybe it will make a little bit more sense after this episode, because there's a ton of stuff in this era one that doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you find out other stuff.
There's a lot of mysteries that aren't resolved yet. There's a lot of unresolved tension with what the characters know and don't know.
Mm-hmm. And things make a whole lot more sense on rereads.
Yep. So you wanted to start by talking about a little bit of stuff about the world?
Yeah. So, the Cosmere obviously contains a lot of planets and shards and worlds. So just as a reminder, the Mistborn books take place on the planet called Scadrial, which, by the way, that's a horrible planet name. It sounds like scab, which is icky.
So the planet, certainly right now, it's icky.
It is scabbish, isn't it?
Ugh.
Anyways, not my favorite planet name. But this planet Scadrial, the two shards agreed to occupy this one world, Preservation and Ruin. They decided to work together to create humans.
Right, and I think we get into that in Hero of Ages a little bit more, but basically there was a master plan where they were going to work together to create humans, and then Ruin was going to be allowed to tear it all down, take it apart, and then Preservation, as is, the according to that shard's nature, betrayed Ruin and wanted to preserve and keep the whole planet around. So instead, Ruin...
They were supposed to put 50-50 into the humans.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And Preservation, the sneaky little guy that he is, put just a teeny tiny bit more. So humans were just a teeny tiny bit more of Preservation than they were of Ruin.
Yeah, more inclined to preserve than to destroy things. But more notably, Preservation created a cage for Ruin at the Well of Ascension. And
this was after they made the humans, I think.
Right, but very relevant to the events of this book is that there's a cage for Ruin at the Well of Ascension that every 1,000 years or so builds up with Preservation's power, and if somebody comes along, takes up the power at the Well of Ascension, and then releases it, that releases the cage.
So you want someone to take up Preservation's power and use it, not give it up.
Right.
Because using it, disperses the power again, and it takes another 1,000 years for it all to collect.
Right.
So the crux of the end of this book was that Vin took up the power and then let it go.
Yep.
So she let Ruin free.
And that's the big twist of things was that, Ruin was able to alter and adjust written things, and
Well, back up here.
Yeah.
Let's back up here.
Yeah.
So Preservation had this whole grand plan. So he knew that he was weakening himself compared to Ruin when he put more power into the humans. So he came up with this master plan that he was going to put forth this prophecy to help guide humans to
make sure that the cage held. That the
to
Well of
make sure the
Ascension-
cage held, and if something went wrong, something to get to the books to the events of book 3, supposedly. So I have no idea where I was going with that.
I'm not sure where we were going with this, but okay.
So the prophecy
was intended to direct the humans, the Ska, and the noblemen, and to keep Ruin trapped for as long as possible. But when Ruin came in and had even while trapped, still had the ability to change what's written down. Ruin was able to alter the prophecies to try to get out as soon as possible.
Yeah. So here we have this quote unquote prophecy that Preservation made eons and eons ago that hopefully is supposed to stand the test of time, which that never happens. Things are always changed.
Well, everything ends.
Everything ends. Thank you, Ruin. So it's been twisted about who knows how many times. So we have no idea what the original prophecy looked like, if that even matters. Was that in Preservation's kind of grand plan that it would change, and hopefully change in a way that, I don't know.
Anyway.
But shards can see into the future to different degrees. Preservation can see into the future, and according to a word of Brandon, he foresaw a lot of what was to come.
Yeah. So that's the stuff about the world that we're in and kind of how this story fits into the history of the world. It's this story is Ruin breaking free, and what's to come next we'll talk about in Hero of Ages.
But just to be clear, the world is fucked.
Yeah. Well, taking a step back, I'm thinking this reminds me a lot of the plot in the anime Gurren Lagann, because in that one also the I guess overarching cosmic battle is between the forces of entropy and people, and it just so it's that one it's played up for comic relief, where at the end, by the end of the series, they're giant robots throwing galaxies at each other, but it's a really funny show.
I'm assuming that that's a gradual lead up to that and doesn't seem as ridiculous when you get there.
No, the point is to be ridiculous.
Okay.
There's a very gradual lead up through most of the series, and then the end it goes off the rails. It goes off the rails a lot of times, actually. But anyway,
okay,
it's a fun show. Anyway,
but I forget if we talked about this. But the whole twist of the book 1 was that
one of the twists of book 1.
One of the twists of book 1 is that Kelsier and the crew overthrew this evil emperor.
And he's saying, "You don't know what I did for you."
Yes. So in this book, we find, by the end, we find out, he's not as evil.
Well,
as we might originally have thought, because he was kind of holding back Ruin.
Yeah, I mean, we can debate the ethics of the Lord Ruler for a long time, but at the end of the day, yeah, he also did something good. He did something right. He did at least one thing right, which was keeping Ruin trapped.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth noting when the Emperor, the Lord Emperor,
Lord Ruler,
the Lord Ruler. When the Lord Ruler, there's a lot of characters. When Reshek took up the power, he was not very skilled at using it. So the reason why this world is so doomsday is because he took up the power, had no idea what to do with it. It was running out. So he actually moved the planet.
It's explained in a lot more detail in Hero of Ages. But yeah.
He moved the planet. He moved the planet closer to the sun. It was too hot. No, he moved it further away. The planet got way too cold. He moved the whole planet closer, and then it was too hot, but the power was running out, so he couldn't move the planet back. So then he created the volcanoes with the ash mounts to protect the people from the sun.
He kept solving one problem and creating 3 more.
Yes.
But with the power of a god.
Yes, and not a very skilled god.
Think Bruce Almighty. Anyway.
Wow, that's an old movie.
No, it's, oh my god, shut up.
I guess it's in color. That's one thing.
Oh my I can't believe this. So how this book works and fits in terms of developing the magic system. I think the big one was that, Ruin, and Ruin's power can, change things that are written down. But the exception is that Ruin can't change what's etched in metal.
Be clarified, he can change metal, but he can't really see what he's changing.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure the way it's described in Hero of Ages is that, he sees in similar ways to how the Inquisitors do with, everything with lots of blue lines.
I don't think we've to this point that we.
Right. I'm explaining it.
Okay. All right.
So when there's something written down in metal, it's just lost in the brightness. It's just all bright blue light.
No, I don't think that we know how Inquisitors see yet.
Right. But I'm explaining that.
Oh.
And that's why you can't change what's etched in metal. That's why, because that's important to the event of this book, is that, Ruin can't change what's etched in metal. And that's why Quan explains that.
No, but we don't know how Inquisitors see. So Inquisitors don't see light reflection like what we normally see.
Right. That's why I explained that. That's why I just said that's the lines with the blue. That's why I'm explaining that.
You didn't really.
Yeah. So the way Inquisitors see is through their allomancy, where lots of steel and iron, you get all of those blue lines towards any source of metal.
Yeah, so they don't see in color or anything because everything has trace amounts of metal, so which is why they can see outlines of things and kind of more or less see somewhat normally. Most traditional allomancers can just see like large chunks of metal, but the Inquisitors have kind of a more sensitive.
They're like savants.
They're savants, and so they can actually see trace amounts of the metal and everything.
The other thing I thought, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but the pool at the Well of Ascension, preservation's perpendicularity, the way it glows is described in similar terms to how Stormlight is described, which I think kind of makes sense in that they're both, pure investiture, right?
The well is pure investiture. Yes.
There was something else I noticed where, Vin's earring is pulled free from her when she enters the well, which, always happens at the climax of the books in Mistborn Era 1, is that her earring gets pulled free. But this time it was because the well was so...
she pulled it free herself because it was annoying her.
It was so burning hot. But it was also like, it's hemalurgy. It's a hemalurgic spike. So it was polar opposite of preservation, which was the power she was taking up.
Mm-hmm. And just as a reminder, hemalurgy is one of the 3 magic systems we see on this planet where it's you're using a metal spike to steal magic power from one person to another.
Yep, and that gets explored a lot more in Hero of Ages.
Yeah, we almost never talk about it in the first 2 books.
Yep, but it's always there because that's how the Inquisitors work.
Mm-hmm.
Zane has a spike he talks about in his chest, and that's the reason why he's quote unquote God speaks to him,
mm-hmm.
and that God wants to destroy everything, kind of like Ruin.
Yeah, so we know from Brandon that, or word of Brandon, that Zane spiked himself. So Ruin can kind of, if you're quote unquote broken, if your spirit web is kind of corrupted a little bit, if you're, have mentally disabled or insane or anything, Ruin has easier access to your mind, so he can get in there. If your mind is not disabled like that, if you are spiked, he can get direct access to you. But, most normal people are not going to be able to hear Ruin or be corrupted by him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of it so much as disabled or normal or anything like that. I think it's just more about, healthy, or, if you're like you said, the cracks in the spirit web is the normal analogy of it.
Mm-hmm. And no one, in most of the Cosmere books don't really talk about spirit webs until you get to Yumi and the...
Oh, yeah. Yumi and the Nightmare Painter.
Yeah.
Huh.
But that's just doesn't really show up. The word spirit web doesn't really show up in, I think, any other book that I can remember.
I feel like it might show up in Stormlight.
I don't know.
The
books are so long.
It's a very Stormlight thing to say, though.
I'll have to look out for it.
Yeah. Was there anything else in terms of developing the magic system that went on here?
Yeah, we've got god metals.
Oh, yeah. This is the first appearance of Lerasium.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I hate about Brandon. It's so confusing. So there are 16, well, our characters as of this point think there's only like 12 metals, allomantic metals, but there are 16 allomantic metals, so they don't know about all of them yet. In addition to those 16, there are god metals. So each shard kind of has their own vessel. So Ruin's original vessel was 80. Preservation's original vessel was Liras. So when you take up a shard, there's normally a metal associated with each of the shards per each of their vessels. So there is a metal in existence called Lirasium, which was the metal that was created when Liras took up the preservation shard. And then there is Atium, which is the metal that was created when At took up Ruin.
Yep. And
so, most of the time these god metals are named after the vessels, because that's
just sort of certainly that's the way it works in the books that we've seen. Now, there are exceptions we'll see in Era 2, but we'll talk about that in Era 2.
Mm-hmm. But let's just get the basics here down first. So Lirasium was the metal that Elend ingested.
Yes, and it made him into a full Mistborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works is it basically it increases his connection with preservation, so now he can.
Well, it fortifies allomantic connections. So because he wasn't an allomancer before, it made him a full-born Mistborn. It rewrites your spiritual DNA. But if you were already a Mistborn and you ingested Lirasium, it would increase your power of a Mistborn, so that you would just be more powerful.
Yeah.
So it just kind of refortifies everything.
Yeah. And so we see the effects of that pretty early on in Hero of Ages, where Elend is just a crazy powerful Mistborn, even compared to Vin.
Spoilers.
Well, this is a spoiler-full episode.
So another thing to know about god metals is that they have both allomantic ferrochemical.
Yep, ferrochemical.
And hemalurgic properties. So there are properties that are associated with each of the three magic systems on the planet.
Yeah.
But in addition to those three properties, each god metal can also do something else. I don't know. That's a word, Brandon. It doesn't make sense to me yet.
Well, where you want to talk about other places we've seen god metals?
Well, I mean, I guess Lirasium, the other thing would be refortifying your allomancing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, the other big example of god metals is the shard blades and shard plate. They're solid investiture that makes them god metals.
Tanavastium, right?
Yeah, and
Tanavast was the
we
vessel.
It's not named like that, right? They haven't named it as such in the books.
I think in the words of Brandon and Coppermine they have.
Oh, okay. Because but basically the reason that shard blades and shard plate are so special is because, spoilers for Stormlight Archive, they're made out of spren, which are little pieces of divinity, right? Pieces of God or of honor or cultivation, and that makes them, because they're solid pieces of investiture, when they become solid, they become that corresponding god metal or alloy between those god metals. You're looking at me.
It's just very hard to digest all of this.
Yeah. So, and the something special that those do is shard blades can cut through anything or sever a soul or whatever. If they get through, they do what magic swords do. That's
true.
Yeah.
Okay. Other properties of god metals. So if a shard is splintered, god metals that existed before will remain ineffective, which has a little bit of a caveat because gradually, very slowly over time, I think it, maybe not. No. Yeah. So the Lirasium that existed will continue to exist even when there's a new vessel for preservation.
Yep. We'll talk more about those, about the special cases as they come up, I think.
I think we're going to have to do an entire episode on god metals in the future.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's probably like 2 or 3 years away, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about, is that all we had for the magic system?
Just maybe a little bit of a teaser on realmatic theory. So one of the epigraphs, I don't know why I would say epithet. I know that epithet is completely different. One of the epigraphs in this book was Quan, Rashek's uncle, talking about studying trees having souls and being made fun of by everybody else for looking into this. So this is just kind of a little teaser into the fact that before the Lord Ruler, they were really starting to study realmatic theory in earnest.
And getting into the cognitive realm.
Because realmatic theory, just a reminder, is kind of that theory that everything exists on 3 planes, on the physical, the spiritual, and cognitive level.
Yep. So, in addition to the stuff that's going on screen, we find out about stuff that's happening elsewhere that's just not talked about in this book. So in Hero of Ages, we find out that the Inquisitors were off, slaughtering a lot of people. In particular, the leaders of the Terrace people. They were eliminating every Feruchemist they could.
Which there's only like one throwaway line in there.
Well, there's only one throwaway line in Well of Ascension, but you find out more retrospectively in Hero of Ages.
Yeah. But I nearly missed it even on this reread of them mentioning that.
Yeah. And then the other big thing is that in Secret History, it's all about what Kelsier, or Kelsier's cognitive shadow, if you're like me, what he is doing in this book is that he is trapped in the well with Ruin. And so he witnesses Hoyd travel through the Well of Ascension and take the other Laracium bead and
travel through the perpendicularity.
And travel through the perpendicularity. And he does get into a fight with Kelsier, which you don't normally see Hoyd fight. But, that's how it goes.
And it would be a whole can of worms to talk about why you don't normally see Hoyd fight, but we'll talk about that later. But the presumption is that Hoyd would have swallowed it. We do not see him swallow it on screen. But we do know that Hoyd has been going around from world to world trying to collect all of the different, magic cultures, systems.
Yeah. And I think we even see him in Words of Radiance in a flashback. I think we see him, drink a metal powder and then, immediately start soothing somebody.
I'll have to look out for that.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure he is a Mistborn.
Yeah, we just don't see him swallow that bead on screen.
So it's sort of something controversial in the fandom as to, is he actually a Mistborn? When did he become a Mistborn? Did he eat the whole bead, or what did he do with it?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and if you're wondering where's preservation in all of this, since there are 2 shards, preservation kind of in the whole gambit to create the prophecy and give more power to the humans and trapping Ruin, it kind of left him dying.
Yeah, so
he has very little power.
Falling apart at the seams. We see a lot of him in Secret History as well, and literally over the course of that novella, just kind of looks like there's chunks falling off of him.
Yeah, so that's why we're really only dealing with Ruin in book 3.
Yep.
But we do get to see the shards kind of take form a little bit as mist creatures.
Yeah.
In book 2.
So I'm pretty sure we only see preservation as a mist creature in book 2.
Yes. That's accurate.
Yeah, because the different thrummings, right? Vin burning her bronze, hears the Well of Ascension, and it has a different rhythm than what the mist creature has. Which, if you're remembering Rhythm of War, that's okay. Those are the 2 natural tones of Scadrial, right? Because that's the rhythm of Ruin and the rhythm of preservation. But yeah, the
whole
mist
tone things.
Yeah, but the mist creature is preservation because it uses allomancy and it soothes Elend.
Yeah.
In particular.
So, we see preservation as that mist creature at the beginning of the book with kind of him looking at Vin on the rooftop and freaking her out quite a bit. So remember that preservation does not want Vin to take up the power because she'll release it. So this mist creature, preservation, is trying to get Vin kind of away from the city long enough for someone else to take up the power and use it up. So that's why that creature was kind of trying to frighten her away, get her away from the well.
And also trying to point Sazed to the well.
Mm-hmm.
I had something.
And then, it also appears to Elend.
Yep.
It was trying to get Ellen to go. Was it trying to get Ellen to go back?
Right, because it was trying to get Ellen to chase after Vin after she had left for the well, for Luthadel, really, to stop the Koloss invasion.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting how little, because
none of the mist creatures make sense until you read Secret History.
Yeah, well, and it's, the driving tension in the book is about the siege and it's about the Koloss invasion, right? And then the Well of Ascension is almost an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get to
which is why we have a trouble remembering the title of this book.
Well, I don't, but anyway.
Why I have trouble remembering the title of this book.
But when you look at how this book fits into the Cosmere, it's totally flipped. Like the Koloss invading Luthadel,
that's a detail.
Yeah, who cares? That's a footnote. But oh my God, they freed Ruin. The world is ending. That's...
Which, when you realize there are 16 shards.
Yeah.
And then you're just releasing one of them.
Hey,
not quite as world-ending.
It's literally world-ending, though.
Okay.
That's what to say. It's just,
It's world-changing. Well, I guess it's Ruin, so it would be ending.
Ruin is literally trying to end the world. That's all the next book. That's all it is. But it's, I just think it's really, sort of ironic that the things that really drive the point of the plot of the book, really don't do that much in the greater scheme. They just sort of they invert a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know how Brandon thinks about these things. Because, he's got to be totally focused on, creating a good book that makes sense for the characters, but then also make sure that it fits in with Cosmere.
And we know that he outlines, he outlines extensively the books, but he also has a larger overarching outline as well.
He has his own personal Wikipedia.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of keeping things consistent, World Hoppers, Cosmere Knots. There's a few of them in Well of Ascension.
Well, do we want to talk about Koloss and Kandra or no, later?
Yeah, we can do that now.
Okay. So Koloss were kind of preempted in book 1, but we didn't get to see them on screen. They mentioned them a couple times, but there was just too much in book 1 for Brandon to bring them on scene.
Right, and they're like super wet. They're super soldiers, I guess. So
they're disgusting.
Yeah.
Just the imagining in them in my mind is just
well, they're like ogres, right? And they're gross.
But their skin stretching and ripping, and you're seeing tendons and.
Alternatively,
they're like zombies.
Well, they're not like zombies. They're like ogres.
They're like a cross between ogres and zombies.
Yeah, whatever. They're ghosts. They're yucky. They're their own unique thing. From the twisted mind of Brandon Sanderson comes the Koloss. But they are hemalurgic creatures. We find out where they come from in the next book. But as far as it pertains in this book, they get their real introduction. They're big people that just keep growing. They are violent. All they know is violence and rage.
Yeah, but spoiler, they are regular humans that are then spiked.
Yep.
To become Koloss.
Yes.
So that is how they...
It's like one of the mysteries of the next book. Oh. Yeah. So, but I mean, if you're here, you're going to be okay with spoilers. So yes, that's where the Koloss come from.
And Kandra created similarly.
Right, except they don't spike people, they spike mist wraiths, which I guess used to be, at the time of Rashek's ascension, were terrorist people, maybe?
Yes, I know that the first
generation were all keepers, right?
The first generation were all keepers. They were all friends of Rashek.
Okay.
And Rashek, in his use of the well, the power, created them.
By the power of Grayskull.
Well, transformed them. Yeah. But he needed to have a way to control them, so he can control them through the spikes.
Well, he controls them through the spikes, but also, he makes more of them through the spikes, right? But he also, he built in that weakness into them, and it's the same one in the Koloss, where when they are subject to strong emotional allomancy, such as the Lord Ruler could do, they just get totally mind controlled. Mm-hmm. Dominate person, if it were a D&D spell in Brando Sando's books.
Sure.
Make a wisdom saving throw. Anyway.
Anyways, no idea what that was. So the whole contract is something that the Kandra kind of made up to manage the relationship between Mistborn and Kandra, so that Kandra aren't slaves.
Well, but they still are.
I mean, I think it's kind of brilliant. They are kind of, yeah, but at least it's kind of more on their terms. And it kind of worked because Mistborn forgot that they could control Kandra. Like, that wasn't common knowledge. So the contract did kind of work.
They don't need Allomancy to control them anymore, though, because they obey them because of the contract now.
Well, at least they aren't getting, because they don't really feel pain unless they're being controlled allomantically.
Well, they do feel pain. No. Orasur and I think Tensoon both explain. They do feel pain.
Huh.
They just can't be killed.
Yeah.
Anywho, I think that's just slavery with extra steps. It's not good.
Well, it's an improvement.
Yes.
But the whole contract is one of the key kind of terms of the contract is that they can't harm other humans. So mostly they're just being used as spies.
Yes. Spies, informants. We do see Tensoon hurt other humans and clearly killed Orasur. Well,
we don't know what happened with Orasur.
He got rid of Orasur and out of the picture.
Yeah.
For the rest of the book. And also he reveals the secret of the weakness of the Kandra, which is also against the contract.
Yeah, Tensoon's not a very good Kandra.
Yeah, and that's like one of the plot lines in Hero of Ages.
And it's very hard to remember Tensoon because the whole book you think is Orasur.
Yeah, I actually thought it was easier to think of as Tensoon after reading Era 2.
Well, while I was reading Era 2 the first time, I kept having to remind myself, like, this isn't just some random Kandra. Like, no, this is the Kandra that you know.
Yeah. The Sunni pups are so cute.
And it's also very strange for the Kandra to be, just as a reminder, it's very strange for Kandra to be taking up animal bones.
Yes.
But that gets highlighted more in the later books.
So, ready to talk about world hoppers? So, the most prominent one is Demux. Yeah, if you're wrong, it can be Demux.
Brandon says that I can pronounce it any way that I want. So I choose to say Demux.
Shows up again, and more than just a cameo again. He's the one that Vin suspects as being a traitor, but it turns out he's just really being suspicious because he's, secretive about being a member and kind of a leader in the Church of the Survivor. We see him in the interlude in the Way of Kings at the Pure Lake, trying to find Hoid.
And if you're wondering if you missed that, they don't use names.
Well, right, but anyway,
it's really that interlude is really frustrating to me because everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's this and this the person," and I'm like, "What the?"
Well, that's why I'm highlighting as I read, and I already know who the fandom is already connected to these identities to, and so I'm highlighting I am highlighting their descriptions, so that way when we get to that in the Way of Kings, I can really match it up and say, "Okay, yeah, I see it." Yeah. Right? Anyway. We don't know much about who he is, or what he's doing at that point, but we know through a word of Brandon that he is a member of the 17th Shard, and we know from another one of Hoid's letters in the Stormlight Archive, in an epigraph, I think, in Words of Radiance, that they are a group of world hoppers who try to keep other world hoppers from interfering on other planets, and especially Hoid. But it's really, I want to know what happens there, because right now, here in Well of Ascension, he is idolizing Kelsier, literally looking at him as a
godlike figure. He is a leader.
Yeah, a prophet and a martyr. And then he's in the future, he's going to be in an organization that is diametrically opposed to organizations like the Ghost Bloods, which interfere in other worlds, who happen to be headed up by Kelsier.
So in more simple words,
he does a 180.
He does a 180. Captain Demux is a leader of the Church of the Survivor that idolizes Kelsier, and then later we find him in a secret society that is opposed to Kelsier.
And I want to know how that happens.
And we don't know.
I'm looking forward to seeing more about that.
Yeah. There's got to be a lot there. We just don't know. We don't know what's there.
Yeah. The other world hopper that we see here is Felt. He has a very minor role in this book and a minor role in Oathbringer.
I love the name Felt.
Yeah. So he is a scout that works for Elend. He's the one who identified that how the besiegers had poisoned the food stores, where they'd gotten in through secret entrances and people were really sneaking out.
And then in Stormlight, he was the one talking about being a foreigner.
So in Oathbringer, in a flashback, when Dalinar is going to meet the Night Watcher, he's got a scout with him who explains that the Night Watcher wouldn't see Felt because Felt was too foreign for the Night Watcher to grant boons or curses to. And that,
and Dalinar was like,
wait a minute, but I'm Alethi. Is she even going to see me? No. Some of us are more foreign than others.
Yeah, which is our...
Yeah, that's
a nod and a wink to say he's a foreigner from a different planet.
Yeah, and he uses the same name in both books, so you that's the connection there.
Yep.
Speaking of Dalinar, there is a fan theory about Dalinar being the subject of the Terrace prophecy. And basically, if you go to the Coppermine page for the exact quotes pulled out from the Terrace prophecy, and especially with the understanding that nobody knows which ones would have been the original prophecy,
which have been tainted by Ruin.
Yeah, versus which ones have been tainted by Ruin, trying to get other people, trying to convince Quan that he's the announcer, or that what's his name, Alendi was a hero of ages, or Vin is a hero of ages, and basically what's true and what's Ruin's influence. About as many of those specific excerpts that we've seen could refer to Sazed, but about as many could also refer to Dalinar. If you go through and read through them after being caught up on Stormlight and think, how could this apply to Dalinar versus how could this apply to Sazed? It's an interesting fan theory.
Yeah, it's a little it is very interesting, and it makes me wonder because we have a as I mentioned, the word of Brandon that preservation foresaw a lot of what happened. So we don't know if that was he could foresee just limited to Scadrial, or if he was foreseeing a lot of the whole Cosmere.
Yeah,
we don't know, and it makes me wonder, like maybe there was two prophecies.
Yeah, maybe they got mixed together. Like I said in the last episode, sometimes prophecies are literally seeing, are intended to be literally seeing the future. But even in like Christian eschatology, talking about, the end of the world, which, like I said, relevant. Anyway, it's, the same prophecy can have multiple meanings, right? It can be a commentary on current events. It can be, observations of when things happen. This is how they tend to go. Or it can be, and here's how the end of the world will come, right?
It's almost as mind-fucking as time travel.
Right. But it's one of those things that it's very, it can have multiple meanings that all at once.
Which is so frustrating.
Well, frustrating. It's, it's
because you get the end of books.
It's something to ponder. In real world Christianity, it's something to ponder, right? It's something to think about. You're never going to know everything.
Yeah, but you get to the end of book 3 of Era 1 and you're like, yes, we fulfilled the prophecy. And then you go online and you read this fan theory and you're like, well maybe not.
I was about to say, even at the end of Era 1, you haven't hit everything on the prophecy, because there's that one line about his name will be Discord and they will love him for it. That's clearly something that's foreshadowing for far future.
But we don't know.
Right.
If that's changed or not.
Given how things go in Bands of Mourning and the Lost Metal, it's pretty clear that there is some element of discord within the hero of ages, Sazed, in the future. So, yeah. Anyway.
So frustrating.
It's not frustrating. Anyway.
I just want to have one mystery solved.
There's always another secret.
Yeah.
All right. What, I've got another sort of like the last thing in my notes is a sort of catch-all for, hey, here's, little one-liners or things that are foreshadowing themes that are going to be in other books. Should we
let's
go
hear
into
it.
that? Okay.
Yeah, let's hear him.
So there's when they're trying to figure out who the traitor is, Vin and I think it's, Orisur, are spitballing ideas, and Vin's like, well, could it be some kind of rogue Khandra? Such a thing does not exist, which is ironic within this book, because even though it's not a rogue Khandra, I mean, it kind of is. Tenzin is the traitor. But
also he's a terrible Khandra.
Also, he's a terrible Khandra. And also, the plot of a rogue Khandra gets revisited again in Era 2 with the whole Shadows of Self book.
Brandon really likes to kind of create some rules, kind of explore the rules, and then exploring ways of subverting the rules, kind of going a step further.
Yeah. So there's one of the big mysteries is why are some people attacked by the mists and some aren't? And that gets revisited. That's a sort of a thing that's that's a mystery that is answered in Hero of Ages, where they are seekers, they're adium mistings, and they are able to burn the adium and help stop ruin.
Those are the people that are not killed.
Yes, people who were killed too, they just didn't survive being snapped. So we already talked about the two different thrummings between the mist spirit being, the rhythm of preservation, and the thrumming from the Well of Ascension being the rhythm of ruin, or the pure tone of ruin. There was a throwaway line that Ariane says. She's throwing a tantrum about her dad. She's like, he brought me, a young lady, along with him to war. Why? Well, it's like, well, hold on. That's like one of the whole conceits of Alethkar in Stormlight Archive is they bring their young ladies and their old children, their whole families go to war.
Different planets, different societies.
Different.
Good on Brandon for really breaking the mold. Norms. Yeah, making sure that we have vastly different cultures to investigate and observe.
So we know that the protagonist, one of the big protagonists in Era 2 is Waxilium Ladrian. And I always forget that he's descended from Breeze, but then I think it's either Sazed or Clubs, refers to Breeze as Lord Ladrian in, one instance of this book. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Huh? Ladrian? And that, I don't know. I noticed that this time.
Yeah, I mean, they always try to make, authors always try to make some kind of connection when you have a big generational gap.
Yeah.
They want to make it somehow connected to the previous characters, even if there's really no reason to have them connected whatsoever. Because there's no reason for Waxilium to be related to any of our original characters. There's no plot point that necessitates.
There's a thematic point. We can talk about that later, I think, because my battery is running low.
Okay, well, we'll revisit that.
And the other thing is, the last bullet point I have is that when Vin takes up preservation's power at the well, she can see that life can only exist at the poles, which, okay, we're clearly all hanging out in the northern pole and the central dominance, but it also hints poles have two ends, and so at the it hints at the existence of Southerskadrians, which we see a lot more in Era 2. She also sees the mist attacking people, and she correctly connects the dots and says that it is the deepness.
Which, as a reminder, is the mists.
The mists.
Yeah.
But she sort of misidentifies it for the wrong, she has the wrong rationale, where she thinks it's because the mist is attacking people, when really the mist, as, part of preservation, is just trying to snap the adium mistings. And in the historical reason why the mist was the deepness was because when it was generating too much, it smothered all the crops. It just smothered too much of life. They weren't able to grow anything. They weren't able to feed anybody, and they started to die.
Yep.
So it didn't even need to attack. It doesn't even need to attack anybody to be the deepness, the threat to the existential.
I thought there were different mists. I thought the mists that were blocking all of the sun and everything, that was from ruin. And the mists that are snapping people is from preservation.
I mean, I don't know, but maybe, because if there were, we know that Ruin's power has it's got Ruin's power is investiture, right? He's got a solid form of investiture in adium, and in that we know the way investiture works is that there would be other states of matter for it, a liquid and a gas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense that there could be a fog or a mist, but, the mists we see in Scadrial are always, preservation's mists. When Vin draws upon the mist, she's always drawing upon preservation.
Well, that's true, but the fact that, there are statues of the Lord Ruler defeating the deepness.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense for it to defeat the preservation's mist.
Why not?
It makes much more sense to be defeating Ruin's mist.
He's defeating any of the mists, right? But that's because that's the whole point. Is it?
Okay, now you sound like Pattern.
No mating. Anyway, anything else in your notes?
Nope, that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you for podcasting me, and thanks, listeners, for listening to our podcast. To send us feedback, thoughts, or questions, please reach out to us. Our email address is cosmerecasual@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is licensed through Tribe of Noise. The artist is Ketsa, and the song is Odyssey.
And until next time, keep your wits about you.